Axel Merk, President and Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments, with my morning update. Well, market is up, I guess. What else is new? Lots of money is being printed and asset prices move higher. Let's talk about valuation here in a second. The initial jobless claims were out this morning, and I suppose most people have seen them. We have had 22.6 million in the continuing claims, and on the initial claims we had 3.169 million initial claims. And so this is currently the most current data set that's available, real-time data, so to speak. And initial claims is whatever has been reported from the states. And then obviously they're not exactly real time either. Different states have different levels of sophistication. I believe Vermont, for example, you still have to call in that you're unemployed. And then obviously when you have a huge wave of people getting unemployed, the front lines might be clogged. And so there will be a delay because of that. And continuing claims are then with a 1 week delay. So but the short of it is that as of a week ago, so to speak, we had 22.6 million people getting unemployment benefits. And so tomorrow, that sets the stage for the non-farm payroll report. That one always has stale data. That is from the middle of April. That's the reference point there. It's a different type of survey and so forth that's being made. But obviously, we continue to lose jobs, and so, but fear not, the markets have no fear. That said, just to kind of make that pivot here to valuation, I talked to somebody who I would not call certainly not a professional investor, but just a normal person who saw the market moving higher, decided to invest in the market, and then asked me what's the unemployment rate like? What's the jobless claims like? So I mentioned the initial jobless claim number type of things. And it says, all right, so the non-farm payroll report is released tomorrow. Well, shouldn't I sell my stocks before? And because the number is going to be dreadful. And needless to say, first of all, as you may be well aware, there is no investment advice given here on this line. And here is some disclosure to have you also read that. Usually you would say, of course, yep, it's priced into the markets, right? The only challenge with that right now is that nobody, the economists, not either, even in the best of times, don't have a clue really what these numbers will be. We know the number is going to be bad, but we don't know how bad, and certainly we don't know how the market will react to it. And whether if this person that I've just referenced, claims to be a longer term investor. But the reason I mention the person is that we all get carried away. When the market is up for a few days, we think that oh my God, why aren't I in the markets? What good news am I missing? And then let the market be down for a few days. And the reaction is, oh my God, it's bad, right? And so I had a chat with a journalist yesterday I've known for quite a few years. And journalists often look something quotable, right? And then I give them a balanced view of what's happening, and that's all great. But I'm not going to quote you with that. It's too boring, right? I mean, he didn't say that, but I just told him, sorry, I don't have anything more exciting. Now, in between the lines here, journalists do always find something that's quotable and exciting that fits their story. But the fact is that we just don't know how this is going to unfold. I mean, we do know that the recovery is going to be slow, but at the same time, and that not everybody's going to get a job back right away. But we don't know what that means for asset prices. This morning there was a guest on Bloomberg Radio. Actually, I think she is a Bloomberg employee who said that according to their models, the forward PE ratio should be 22 right now. That would be appropriate. And the justification for that is that interest rates are so low, so you're adjusting the discount factor. Now, keep in mind, if this is indeed a journalist rather than somebody who manages money, models are easy to come by. And so you can always create a model and say, great, putting your money down is a very, very different story. The same thing with crisis management. Same journalists ask me, well, would you have done anything different in crisis? And yes, of course I would have, but what am I to say, right? I mean, sometimes action is more important than just being the backseat general. I have the greatest respect for the people who who do make some of the tough decisions right now. And that, of course, doesn't mean that I won't voice my opinion, but it is a lot easier for us here to be the backseat generals to criticize things. When I criticize things, it's usually it's sometimes specific actions, but usually it is focused on the fact that a framework is missing. What we have to be aware is that we're setting precedents here, right? I mean, we saw that the moment the Fed went in crisis modes, all the tools of 2008 were deployed and then some. And so there will be another crisis when this one is over. And guess what? All the tools are being deployed right now may well be again deployed and then some. Yes, I do have to take a sip here to chew on that. And just I mean, it's been widely reported that Berkshire Hathaway, again, no investment recommendation, hasn't been on a buying spree because kind of the government has preempted it. And so, what sort of incentives does that put in place? It puts the incentive in place that we don't need the Berkshire Hathaways. I mean, don't worry, Warren Buffett is going to be just fine. But the point being here is that if the incentives are taken away to have a huge cash reserve, so you can gobble up the cheap guys when times get tough, there may well be fewer rounds. Berkshire Hathaway will probably still be around. But others may choose not to do this. Why try to compete with the Fed's bazooka, right? So in many of these businesses, funding may well have been around, but it's been a decision that's been made to subsidize everybody. And there may be good reasons for that, but let's not kid ourselves. There are unintended consequences. So a lot of talk about helping the automotive industry. Germany, same thing. Right? They are thinking about not a cash for clunkers program, they'll call it something else, but incentives. Well, that is great. These jobs are important, but let's not kid ourselves. That will foster an overproduction. That will increase the supply than we would otherwise have. And that may well prolong the kind of the challenges of the industry. Now, the challenge has been so severe that people think it's in the national interest, in the interest of the jobs, or whatever it is, to buffer this sort of impact. And obviously that's why we have a political process. I'm just cautioning that there is no free lunch and there will be an impact here. Just for the automotive industry, as many of you are aware, the rental car companies are not doing well. Some of them have defaulted on their lease payments. They're renegotiating the terms. They're not out there buying cars right now. And so those fleet sales, they're normally low margin sales, but those fleet sales are not happening right now, and so it's it's one of the many corners. And if you think about the consumer, you've been bruised. All right, so let's say that you get a job back, and just talked to somebody. His wife was working mostly organizing supplies out of China to some businesses in the U.S. and obviously that's not going so well. So she's only working a few days a week, and they cut the salary accordingly to be prorated. And I suppose that's much better than being laid off. But of course, there are some wounds. I said, all right, okay, well, now I got a little less money, and hopefully things will come back. But now let's assume things do come back. Are you going to be spending as much as you were before? And the reason I'm questioning it is that let me ask you this question. Will there be another wave or another two waves of this virus coming back? And many say yes. I presume as well. The relevance here is that there's a risk of a resurgence of the virus. And so with the memory of the shock we've had now, I think many of us say, wait a second, if it does get me, if it gets my friends, if it gets my partner, whoever might be the breadwinner or whatever it is, I better be careful on how I spend my money. And so that sentiment will be there. Now, we might get a cash or clunkers program, we might get something else, and we'll obviously, one of the reasons we'll probably see more government action on quote unquote stimulus is to get cash into the hands of consumers who will actually spend it. And so we will be seeing some interesting and some odd moves here in the markets. Good. So then I touched on the S&P being up. Bonds are stronger today. the 10 years up 5 ticks, the 30 years up 7 ticks. The um, let me first say the 3-month T-bill is at 10 basis points, and the 3-month LIBOR rate is now to 47. So continuing to come down ever so slowly. Fed funds rate, effective one, is at 5 basis points. The currency market is a bit messed up today, and on my screen it shows the NOK up, well, up earlier 2%, and one up 1.8%. That's not exactly correct. Well, there were some flukes at the close yesterday, the New York close, in the currency moves, and so depending on which reference point you use, any table you look at will show other extremes. On a Earlier today, on a 2-day basis, the NOK was down 38 basis points, and so now it's weakened another 20 or so. So it's down. Now, what happened in Norway is there was an unscheduled cut in interest rates from 0.25% to 0.0%, but there's always a but. They indicated that that's the end of it, right? And so the question then is, well, what you should do. So when interest rates are cut, it's not like that the currency is usually weakening. It's what was priced in, and if something is unexpected, that's when currencies do move. So now I see that the NOK on a 2-day basis down 10 basis points. I have to say it on 2-day basis because there's too much volatility here. And so usually when you have a cut, it's about, will there be more cuts? And when you announce that you have the final cut in a series of cuts, that's often a positive for the currency because the next cut move might be higher. Now, that might be a little premature to say, but yes, if you reach a zero and if you've decided you don't want to go negative, then that's about as low as you can go. And then, of course, energy, we have West Texas up 7.4% right now. That's up at $1.8, $1.80 at 25.80, and Brent is at $31. That's up a little over 4%. Norway, obviously, more relevant is the Brent price there. Gold is up today. Gold is up $12 in the spot market, about 0.75% at 16.98. The futures at 17.01. So a tight spread now again, up 13.40 in the futures market. So those spreads have come down quite a bit from the extremes we saw recently. Again, this is the COMEX contract here, and we're not giving any futures advice. Don't tell you to buy it, but since the COMEX has been in the news, but it appears that at least for the time being, those supply issues are not on the mind of the markets that they had in the COMEX market. The Mexican peso is kind of the strongest currency here on my board, and the Brazilian real the weakest one. And let's see what else. Oh, well, there's a lot being written about how Germany gets everything right and the US gets everything wrong. They're different cultures. They have different approaches. We could all learn from one another, adopting some best practice, I suppose. The Germans love to micromanage things, and they have a population that likes to follow rules, and so I guess it's possible. Most of the journal had an article how actually Germany didn't require business to shut down. They just told them if you do keep operating, you have to have strict protocols in place. And many businesses in Germany have labor representatives on the board, and so they devised for many businesses strict protocols, including contact tracing within their staff and whatnot. And so about 80% of businesses stayed open. It doesn't mean they had a lot of revenue during the shutdown, but it is a lot easier, obviously, to carry through a business if you keep it open. But the German government is also micromanaging many other things. For example, there's a student subsidy program. Tuition is obviously much lower than in the US to begin with, but still people are complaining that housing is too expensive and so forth. And so there's a subsidy program, and usually those subsidies go away if you take a job on the side, and they just passed, for example, a rule that you can continue getting the subsidy if you're a student and have a job on the side. And so every day there are rules like this being passed, and it's kind of difficult to keep track of them. And of course there's some there's first there was the state of Bavaria. Now it's on a national level. They want to give a special one-time payment to the healthcare workers, and of course they argue: is this enough? Is this the right one? Should it be broader and whatnot? But overall, the discussion is far less political. In the U.S., everybody sees it play out every day, and we have a much more decentralized approach, and the focus appears to be much more on the political outcome. Right? We blame China um, because then you don't blame the government. And and in any crisis that's being managed, there will be mistakes, and the anger is directed somewhere, right? It's one reason, talking about Europe here maybe again for a moment, why Brussels has no chance because they have no microphone. There is no Obama or Trump at the head of the EU. And so when something goes back bad in Europe, you always blame Brussels. Um, and that's a huge, huge problem for the European Union, of course. And so when you have a leader, you love the guy, you hate the guy or gal, but that's where the buck stops. Now, obviously, if something doesn't, a war isn't good, a pandemic isn't good, and so obviously those leaders then want to deflect things as well, and everybody has their own style of doing it. Um, Trump decides he wants to deflect things towards China. I don't think that's helpful, but it is what it is. There are some articles that have come out that the rise of Nazism in Germany may have been due to the pandemic in 1918 in the world, including in Germany, and they obviously not suggesting that somehow Germans turned into Nazis because of that, but they did show that in depending um, on the kind of people, how many people were affected and so forth, it did influence how extreme they would vote in follow-up elections. And well, this is not the right podium here to expand on this. There's too much, but policy does matter, and it matters how people perceive these policies. And so, the question is what you focus on and when. And of course, we are in the political season, as we almost always are here in the US. On that note, yes, we will probably see more stimulus. It's going to be very interesting to see as the kind of the immediacy of the crisis is moving on to more of a chronic situation, whether the Congress will get things done and what they will get done. In the past, Congress got things done when you add a price tag. And that's really my biggest concern in all of this. By the way, I mentioned a journalist called me yesterday. Well, the question was really about Trump's comments on China. And I told him, quite frankly, I don't really care too much. This is just deflecting. What I do care about and what I am concerned about is the rise of socialism we had in the 10 years post financial crisis. I don't want to even dream or think about what sort of sentiment we're going to have coming out of the current crisis. Um, we spent $3 trillion or so. We're probably going to spend much more, and we are bailing out a lot of businesses that wouldn't have needed the money. Obviously a lot of money has gone to people that urgently need it, and then depending on the eye of the beholder, obviously deserve it as well. But almost certainly many people receive it who, according to some political groups, have not deserved it. So I told him that our business would have qualified, but I'm not going to touch the stuff with a broomstick. And he said, yeah, they would have probably written a column about us taking it. And I'm not claiming that we're important enough to be worthy of a column, but our type of business, right? Imagine a some financial service company that's doing okay. Um, Getting bailout money, and then some other business that really needs the money not getting it. Well, that has happened. It has happened. It will happen, and I am certain that journalists will dig into that. The Freedom of Information Act will give access to the businesses that got the money, and so there's going to be a backlash, and then more importantly, I think Congress realizes you can spend $3 trillion and the stock market goes up. Why on earth aren't we spending more money? Voters love that we spend money. Let's just do it, right? And so again, we're setting these precedents. I don't think we've let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, those sort of implications, I'm far more concerned. Now, in the meantime, hey, maybe buy the S&P 500 and go home and then get rich. It doesn't work that way in practice, right? It doesn't work that way, and there is no free lunch. So there will be implications, and something is clearly not right. All right, I'll leave it on that cheery note, and hope everybody has a good Thursday, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.